When I was a young boy, my father took me into the city to see a marching band. He said, son, when you grow up, would you be the savior of the broken, the beaten and the damned? He said, will you defeat them, your demons and all the non-believers, the plans that they have made? Because one day I'll leave you a phantom to lead you in the summer to join the Black Parade.
Welcome back to the Cork Football Podcast. This episode will be the first in our look back at previous games from history, and this week we're going to look back at the Munster Football Finals of 1984, 85 and 86. And the reason I picked this trilogy is because I think there are certain parallels with the current time. Kerry, like that time, they're a dominant force today. Fair enough, they were a failing force at that time, but they still did it 3 in a row. The current Kerry team is a lot fresher, and but the only thing I'd say is Jack O'Connor is a real key part to that setup, and without him I think that they are diminished, and I think that's why he was nearly strong-armed into staying on. And also, I think the demands of the game today are much, much higher and much more difficult to keep a team going. I think, look, they'll probably win an All-Ireland this year. There's a lot more teams around, maybe next year, to take them down. And I'd say a 3 in a row would probably be the outside of their limit. So I would think that we should be coming into our peak of the bunch we have now, maybe in 2 years' time. So there's another similarity as well, is that I suppose 1983 was a bit of a false dawn for us. Tadhg Murphy's late winner in the Munster Final, and there's certain similarities with the Mark Keane 2020 winner. We didn't really kick on from either of those wins. A thing was that there was a few key players in the 87 to 90 period, and they started to emerge around that time from 1980 onwards, really. But there was some very good under 21 teams, and players started coming in 84, 85 and 86. We were getting 1 or 2 every year, and we were slowly building a squad that was going to compete at the highest level. 80 to 82, we introduced Dave Barry, Jimmy Carrigan. That was in 1980, Coonahan in 81, and Coleman Corrigan in 82. John Cleary came in 83. And I'd see them as kind of very similar now to players that we have that will be around in 2 or 3 years' time. Daniel O'Mahony, Colm O'Callaghan, Rory Maguire, Chris Ogue, Tommy Welch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in 84 with a big influx of new players that were key, as I said, to the 87 and to 90 period. With John Kearns, Cahalane, Tony Nation, Barry Coffey, Colm O'Neill and Michael Maguire. Now, that final was played in Killarney. Big crowd, 36,000. If we could only have those days again. The final score on the day was Kerry 314, Cork 210. And the Cork team lined out that day. John Kearns, Mick Lynch, Nemo, Mark Healy, the Bars fullback, John Evans, Skibbereen, Niall Cahalan, Christy Ryan, Jimmy Kerrigan, the half-back line, Coleman Corrigan, Dominic Creedon, midfield, half-forward line, Tony Nation, Mick Burns, Castlehaven, and Dave Barry, and inside was Dinny Allen, John Allen, and Tig Murphy. Kevin Keheley and Barry Coffey were the subs that came on that day. Now, that happened to be John Allen's last game for Cork football. And, and there's one thing I often said about John Allen, and we all know that the success he's had with the hurlers, and he's a very astute man. I often would thought that he might get involved with the Cork footballers, and I'd love to see it, because I think he would add something different. Maybe just, I know they'd often be on about outside coaches, but I think he'd bring a kind of a different perspective. Look, there's plenty of time for him yet. The expectations were pretty high after going so close in '83. We'd beaten Kerry, and we gave Dublin all they had to beat us. And the consensus going into that Munster final that Kerry were they were kind of at the end of their tether. We had beaten them in '83. They lost 5 in a row in Offaly in '82. And I know Dublin have blown that out of the water since, they have 6 in a row, but and breaks my heart to say that. But we all became big Dublin fans there for a few years, and there was a few years there I was secretly hoping that someone might get me in the Chris Kringle a Dublin jersey, but it never happened anyway. But 84 was centenary year, and Mick O'Dwyer I suppose fairly obviously he did say after the Kerry were going to put on a big push for that, and there was actually a preliminary competition that year for the centenary, and it was a knockout competition, Centenary Cup, and we drew Derry in that, and we were actually the first team to exit that competition. Derry beat us up in Derry. They weren't any great shakes at the time, but we had a bit of a mishap actually en route to that game. We travelled to Dublin, and we were going between Houston and Connolly Station, and the players called into some hotel, and obviously the whole squad, and they left the bags in the lobby, the gear, and the gear was actually stolen, so they actually had to borrow playing gear above in Derry, and obviously that wasn't ideal. Teddy McCarthy actually played in that game. He didn't feature in championship after, but that was his first appearance for Cork footballers. The game, as it was reported, was it was kind of the Pat Spillane show, they said, and that was Niall Cahalan's first encounter with Pat Spillane, and we know how that arrangement went after. Cork did pretty well. I think they especially in the first half, they did okay, but it petered out anyway. Dave Barry scored 1-4 that day. Kerry had a lot of their old guard still. They really had they had 3 newcomers that year. John Kennedy, he was from North Kerry, and he was a good free taker, I remember him. Willie Maher, and our good friend from Radio Kerry, or Radio Nanva, as some people call it, Ambrose O'Donovan, and we all love listening into Ambrose, especially when Kerry are losing. But I was at the game. I know I was at the game, but I don't have any specific memories of it. The way memories kind of blend into one another there of the matches in Killarney. But what I do remember is that Christmas I got what would I have been that time? I was 11. So I got an annual. It was called Gale Sport 85, and I just do remember in it there was an article about Owen Liston, and there was a picture of him in that Munster final being marked by Kevin Keheley, and the title of the article was On Boomador, and seemingly he got that name from there was a very good German soccer player, a goal poacher. He was Gerd Muller, and I think he picked it up from that. And there's a funny story, I think, about he told it on radio there one time. They were on a plane somewhere, himself, the bomber, and a few of his buddies, and they were sitting kind of far away from each other, and someone shouted down the plane, calling Owen. He called down the plane bomber, and the air hostess got a bit panicky, and she had to be calmed down anyway, and they had to explain what the story was. But that's 84. 1985, Páirc Keeve, big crowd again, 28,500. It was a wet, miserable day, and that game was refereed by an old friend of Cork, John Maloney, that anyone who was around in 76 would remember. And the game finished up 2-11 to 11 points. Seemingly the goals were the difference that day. It was kind of nip and tuck coming up to the end of the first half, and Liston got a goal, and Mikey Sheehy got a goal straight after half time, and that kind of finished it. That day Cork introduced onto the scene Denny Cullity, Tony Davis and Teddy Mack. The team that lined out that day was John Kearns, Cahalan Corrigan, John Evans, Tom Mannix, Conor Coonahan, Jimmy Kerrigan, Barry Coffey, Martin McCarthy, Yall were midfield, Paddy Harrington, Doneraile, Teddy McCarthy centre forward, Tony Nation, Tony Sullivan the hurler was corner forward, Colm O'Neill and Dave Barry. Doneraile had two players in that team that day. Doneraile were going well that time in intermediate, I remember. Kerry had very little changes from 84, so the hopes were high. We were doing well at under 21, and we had a few of them under 21 players were coming into the setup. But I think earlier in the season there was a kind of a continuation from the Centenary Cup. It was called the Ford Cup, and we were badly beaten in the final of that by Kerry. And I actually, I got my memories mixed up there. I remember we were at that Ford Cup final, and there was a poor enough crowd at it, and I kind of mixed that up with the Munster final. I had that memory that there was a poor crowd at that Munster final, but that's actually what I was remembering. On to 1986, and what I do remember in 1986 was there was big buzz around a newcomer that we had, a young fella coming in, John O'Driscoll, and I do remember that, and it's gas the things you remember. I vividly remember we went to Mass and Rylan on the way back, and we picked up my Uncle Martin and another man from Mahina, Ned Bryan, and we were going back, hopes were high. Kerry, even though they'd won the All-Ireland the previous year, they went to a replay in the semi-final with Monaghan, and they gave them all they could do to beat Dublin in the final. So that day, Dennis Walsh, the hurler, St. Catherine's, he started at wing back, and there was Tony Sullivan and Tomás Mulcahy. They also came on as subs. Kerry really had no new faces that day. From kind of their usual boys. The only fella that kind of came in that time was Timmy Dowd, and I remember he always stood out. He looked more like a fella that should have been on an episode of Dallas. He had a fierce 10, and 10 legs weren't very common that time. The Cork team that went out that day, John Kearns, Tony Nation, Corrigan, and John Evans, Cahalan, Conor Coonahan, Dennis Walsh, Jimmy Kerrigan, Martin McCarthy, Yall again. They were midfield, Teddy Mack, Barry Coffey, Dave Barry, and John O'Driscoll, and Colm O'Neill. Actually, sorry, I got that wrong now. You had John O'Driscoll, Colm O'Neill, and Robert Swain, Yall was the full forward line. John Evans, actually, he played in the 87 final against Meath, and he was unlucky. That was the last we saw of him. Just missed the boat. That day behind in 86, big crowd again, 33,000. It ended up Kerry 12 points, Cork 8 points. Seemingly Coleman Corrigan went off injured, and it really disrupted the back line. And it took the management a few minutes to reorganise the show, and Kerry had 4 points scored in them few minutes, and that was the difference in the end. The press report that day, it kind of basically said that Kerry were mediocre and Cork were inept. the standout player that time was Tom Spillane. He was playing centre back, and he was a fine player, you know, and a kind of an unassuming kind of a fella as well, unlike his sibling. That Kerry team, Dennis Collin was coaching that time, and he said after, like, he said that they were there for the taking, and they were really disappointed to lose that. They had very high hopes going back, and they had a bit of a mini Saipan on the Thursday night before. They went back to Killarney to have a run out on the field in Killarney, and when they went back, they actually had no footballs. They had to borrow footballs from some crowd behind. I suppose they were good and soft anyway. So, I don't know was there any Ry Keane in the bunch that kicked up a fuss, but, and actually speaking of Ry, I know he does have a soft spot for the Cork footballers. I've seen him below Parky Ring and up in Croke Park, following him, and I suppose if he is ever listening, he could bring, Neville and Carragher there to Killarney and me. I'd say they'd enjoy it. But that was Dennis Collins. That was his second year term, and Billy Morgan came in then for 87, and I suppose the rest is history after that. Now, I'm going to let you in a bit of a family secret, and it wasn't so much a secret because everyone knew it, because he never really hid it. And any time he comes up in conversation, till nearly always be mentioned, and that's about my late Uncle Donal. No, he was a fine footballer in his day. Supposed to be a very good man to catch a ball. He wasn't a big man, but and he absolutely idolised Mick O'Connell. And the infatuation got so out of hand that he actually started supporting Kerry. And you know, I'd say at the start it was a bit put on and a bit of a wind up, because he was an awful rogue. And but it progressed into into being a full blown Kerry fan. And he had all I remember he had all the Kerry 4 in a row videos and all that sort of stuff. And but the only thing is, the saving grace is that I don't think I ever saw him wearing the Kerry colours. So at least that. But the worst thing about the whole thing is that he spread the contagion to his son John, and to this day he's still a die-hard Kerry fan. And another thing, to my eternal shame, I went up to the All-Ireland final with him in 1985, and I was shouting for Kerry in my innocence. So that's 84, 85 and 86. And just on that note, before I forget, I just want to acknowledge that Bob Hounahan there, it was his book now. I got a lot of that information out of, and it actually, I'd really recommend it. It was actually Kieran Shannon recommended it to me, and I got a loan of it there from his son his nephew Morris Brew, and thanks to Morris for that. And the book is called Rebels with a Cause, and I would recommend it for anyone who wants to have a deep dive there into Cork football around that time. And Bob, in fairness to him, he did great work with the Cork underage around that time, and a lot of great players went through his hands. And as I said just before I finish up, the reason I did that now, I think that there is a lot of similarities between now and then. I think we are on the precipice of something. We don't have the underage success of that time, but we still are adding a few players every year. Last year, we had Sean Walsh, Sean McDonnell and Sean Brady, and they're kicking on this year. And this year, we have Dara Sheedy's coming in. You can see Conor Daly, Jacob O'Driscoll. They're getting a run. And look, if we can get Cathal O'Mahony, Corbett there back fit, and maybe David Buckley there as well, I think we have a good chance. We could be challenged for a quarter-final place, and if the ball hopped right for us, we might even look at a semi-final this year. Look, I know I'm being very optimistic there, but sure, look, and that would really set us up for a great run at 2029 to 2030. Look, all I'll say again before I finish up, if you listen to this, just like the video, subscribe to the channel, and just hit the notifications, and you'll be notified. And anyone that's on Twitter, just follow me on the Twitter and repost or share the videos or whatever, and it'll really help me. Actually, it's not helping me, it's helping us. Look, we are a community, and look, the more people we can get this out to, casual Cork supporters there that it might just give them that little push to come to Cork football games. And I think we could just, if we could get the vibe up, I think we might be able to manifest something for the lads. So look, I'm going to leave it at that, and take care and God bless.